Officer James Mercer knew something was wrong the moment he pulled into his driveway. The usual chorus of excited barks from Maverick and Storm, his two Belgian Malinois K9 partners, was conspicuously absent. Instead, there was only silence from the spacious backyard where the highly trained police dogs typically awaited his return. James killed the engine of his patrol car and felt his stomach tighten. After 8 years on the force and 5 as a K9 handler, he had developed a sixth sense for trouble. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across his modest suburban home as he stepped out, hand instinctively moving to his service weapon. "Maverick, Storm," he called, striding quickly toward the backyard gate. That's when he saw it, a jagged 3-foot gap in the chain-link fence that enclosed his yard. The metal had been deliberately cut, the edges still sharp and gleaming in the late afternoon light. James broke into a run, heart hammering against his ribs as he burst through the gate. The yard was empty. 2 water bowls sat undisturbed by the back door. The specialized training equipment was untouched, but his dogs, his partners worth over $40,000 in training, and his faithful companions were gone. James grabbed his radio. "This is Officer Mercer, badge number 4487. I have a situation at my residence. My K9 units have been removed from my property. Someone has cut through my fence. I need immediate assistance." As he waited for a response, James noticed something on the ground near the cut fence. A small lime green pamphlet. He picked it up, his confusion morphing rapidly into disbelief as he read the bold text. "Animals deserve freedom. We liberate the oppressed." Below the text was a crude drawing of a dog breaking free from chains. "You've got to be kidding me," James muttered, crumpling the paper in his fist. Across town, in a modest bungalow with a Rescue Mom car magnet prominently displayed on her Subaru Forester, Diane Winters was experiencing the worst miscalculation of her 52 years. Her living room furniture had been pushed against the walls. A lamp lay shattered on the floor, and backed into the corner, hackles raised and teeth bared, were 2 of the most intimidating dogs she had ever encountered. "Nice puppies," Diane whispered, her voice quavering as she pressed herself against the wall. "You're safe now. No one's going to hurt you." The larger of the 2 dogs, with a sleek tan coat and intelligent dark eyes, responded with a deep, rumbling growl that made her blood freeze. The other, slightly smaller but no less imposing, had positioned itself between her and the door, effectively cutting off her escape route. Diane had planned this rescue for weeks. She observed the poor dogs left alone in that yard day after day. She had documented their neglect with dozens of photos of them confined behind that awful fence. She had made multiple calls to animal control, only to be told that the property met all requirements for housing canines. Clearly, the system was broken. So, armed with wire cutters and righteous indignation, she had taken matters into her own hands. What Diane hadn't anticipated was that these weren't ordinary pets. She hadn't noticed the small, discreet sign on the side of the fence that read, "Caution, Police K9." She hadn't recognized the specialized equipment in the yard for what it was. And she certainly hadn't expected that these neglected animals would behave like the highly disciplined, potentially lethal working dogs they actually were. As the gravity of her situation dawned on her, Diane's phone began to ring. The caller ID showed her neighbor Pam, who had encouraged her rescue mission. With trembling fingers, she answered, never taking her eyes off the 2 predators watching her every move. "Pam," she whispered, "I've made a terrible mistake." James paced his backyard, phone pressed to his ear as his sergeant assured him that patrol units were already canvassing the neighborhood. His fellow K9 handlers were en route to assist. These weren't just missing dogs, they were highly trained law enforcement assets and crucial members of the force. "We got the helicopter up with thermal imaging," Sergeant Donovan informed him. "If they're outside, we'll find them." James ended the call and crouched by the cut in the fence. As a K9 handler, he learned to think like his dogs, to anticipate their reactions. Maverick and Storm were trained to apprehend suspects, detect explosives, and protect their handler at all costs. Without his commands to guide them, they would default to their training, remain together, secure their location, and neutralize any threat. That thought made his blood run cold. In the wrong situation, his dogs could be dangerous. He touched his earpiece as dispatch came through. "Officer Mercer, we've got a 911 call from 1472 Oakwood Drive. Female caller reporting she's trapped by aggressive dogs that enter her home. Caller is extremely distressed." James felt a surge of hope mixed with dread. "That's 4 blocks from here. Send units, but tell them to stand down until I arrive. These are my K9s we're dealing with." As he sprinted to his patrol car, his phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "We saved them from you. They deserve freedom, not slavery. Animals have rights too." James gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white as he peeled out of his driveway. The self-righteous ignorance of it all was infuriating. His dogs weren't pets. They were working animals who thrived on their jobs, who had been specifically selected for their drive and intelligence. They lived with him because the bond between handler and K9 was sacred, essential to their effectiveness as a team. Meanwhile, Diane Winters had managed to inch her way to the kitchen, the two Belgian Malinois tracking her every movement with predatory focus. Her legs trembled as she reached for her landline phone on the counter, never breaking eye contact with the larger dog. 911. What's your emergency? There are two very large, very aggressive dogs in my house, Diane whispered, her voice barely audible. I can't get out. They won't let me move. Ma'am, are you injured? No, but I think they're going to attack if I try to leave. She didn't mention that she had brought this on herself. That part could wait. Ma'am, can you tell me how the dogs got into your home? Diane hesitated. I brought them here. But I didn't know what they were. I thought they needed help. There was a pause on the line. Ma'am, are these dogs possibly Belgian Malinois? Brown with black faces? Yes. How did you know? Those are police K9s reported missing from an officer's residence. They are trained police dogs, do not make any sudden movements. Units are on their way, including their handler. Diane felt the room spin as the implications hit her. Not neglected pets. Police dogs, trained police dogs. The pamphlets Pam had given her about identifying animal abuse flashed through her mind. The same pamphlets she'd been leaving on the officer's mailbox for weeks. Her Facebook group, Suburban Animal Saviors, had applauded her activism. Her post detailing her plan to liberate the abused dogs had received dozens of supportive comments. Pam had even supplied the wire cutters. And now here she was cornered by law enforcement animals that she had essentially stolen. A sharp series of knocks at her front door made her jump. The dog's attention snapped toward the sound, her posture somehow becoming even more alert. Police, open up. The smaller dog let out a warning bark that echoed through the house. I can't, Diane called back, her voice cracking. The dogs won't let me near the door. Outside, James arrived on scene to find 3 patrol cars already parked in front of the modest bungalow. He recognized the address now, the same one that had been filing bogus complaints about his dogs for months. The pieces were falling into place, and the picture they formed made his jaw clench with anger. As he approached the house, he could hear Maverick's distinctive bark from inside. Relief washed over him. They were here. They were alive. Situation, he asked the officer in charge. Female inside claims she can't reach the door because the dogs are preventing her. No injuries reported. She admitted to bringing the dogs here herself. James nodded grimly. I'm going in. They know me. He approached the door and called out with a clear, commanding tone he used in training. Maverick, Storm, Sten. Inside, the effect was immediate. Both dogs froze at the sound of the German command, ears perked forward. Ma'am, James called through the door. I'm Officer Mercer, the handler for these K9s. I'm coming in. Do not move, do not speak, and do not make eye contact with the dogs. As James turned the doorknob and found it unlocked, he prepared himself for what would come next, facing not only his dogs but also the person who had put them all in this dangerous situation. The person who, in their misguided attempt to save his partners, had nearly created a tragedy. James pushed the door open slowly, his movements deliberate and controlled. The scene that greeted him might have been comical under different circumstances. A middle-aged woman frozen against her kitchen counter, terror etched across her face, while Maverick and Storm maintained their vigilant positions, effectively keeping her cornered. Herr, James commanded firmly. Both dogs immediately responded, trotting to his side and sitting at attention, their transformation from threatening guardians to obedient partners instantaneous. James knelt briefly, running his hands over each dog, checking for injuries while murmuring soft praise. Relief flooded through him as he confirmed they were unharmed. Diane watched the interaction with wide eyes, her knuckles white as she gripped the counter behind her. The contrast between the animal's current behavior and their previous menacing stance was jarring. Are you injured, ma'am? James asked, his voice professionally detached despite the anger simmering beneath the surface. And no, Diane stammered. They didn't hurt me. They just wouldn't let me leave. That's what they're trained to do with suspects, contain and control. James stood, clipping leashes to both dogs' collars. These are police K9s, not pets. They're trained to apprehend potentially armed and dangerous individuals. Color drained from Diane's face. I didn't know. I thought. You thought what exactly? James interrupted, his professional facade cracking slightly. That cutting a fence and stealing dogs was justified. I wasn't stealing them, Diane protested, finding her voice. I was rescuing them. They were all alone in that yard day after day. No stimulation, no freedom. She gestured toward the pamphlet visible in James's pocket. Animals deserve better than being imprisoned. James took a deep breath, steadying himself. Ma'am, do you have any idea what you've done? These dogs are worth over $80,000 combined in training and equipment. They're essential assets to our department's narcotics and apprehension units. More importantly, they're my partners. Before Diane could respond, two more officers entered the home, nodding respectfully to James before turning their attention to her. "Diane Winters?" one asked, though it clearly wasn't a question. "You're under arrest for theft of police property, destruction of property, and obstruction of justice." "Arrest?" Diane's voice rose an octave. "But I was trying to help. This is a misunderstanding." As the officers began reading her rights, James's phone rang. It was Sergeant Donovan. "Mercer," he answered, stepping outside with his dogs. "We've got something you should see," Donovan said. "We pulled the CCTV footage from your neighbor's security camera. Your fence cutter wasn't alone. There was a car waiting down the street, a green Subaru. We've got the plate." James glanced back through the window where Diane was now being handcuffed, protesting loudly about her rights and the injustice of it all. "I think I know whose car that is," he replied grimly. "She's being processed now." "There's more," Donovan continued. "We found a Facebook group called Suburban Animal Saviors. They've been planning this for weeks. Multiple members were involved in surveillance of your home. They've been tracking your schedule, documenting when you leave for work, when you come home." A chill ran down James's spine. The implications were disturbing, not just for him, but for his entire unit. If civilians could so easily target K9 officers' homes, what other vulnerabilities existed? "Sir, I'd like to pull in internal affairs on this. We need to review security protocols for all K9 handlers." "Already done," Donovan assured him. "But right now we need you and your dogs at the station for formal documentation. And Mercer, we're going to need statements about any previous interactions with this woman." As James led Maverick and Storm to his patrol car, he noticed a small crowd gathering at the end of the street. Several people were filming with their phones while others whispered to each other, pointing at him and the dogs. One woman stepped forward, her expression confrontational. "Those dogs should be free, not used as weapons." James ignored her, helping his partners into their specially designed compartment in the back of his vehicle. He knew from experience that engaging with protesters only escalated situations. But as he closed the door, securing his dogs safely inside, another voice called out, this one different, supportive. "Officer, I'm your neighbor, Ted Wilson. I have security footage of that woman watching your house for the past 2 weeks. I tried to report her loitering, but nothing came of it. I want to make a statement." James nodded gratefully at the older man. "That would be helpful, sir. An officer will take your information." As James slid into the driver's seat, he caught sight of Diane being placed in the back of a patrol car. Their eyes met briefly through the windows, and he was surprised to see not remorse but defiance in her expression. This wasn't over, he realized. Whatever misguided crusade had led this woman to cut his fence and take his dogs, she still believed she was right. And based on the small crowd gathered, she wasn't alone in her convictions. The implications troubled him deeply as he pulled away from the curb. Maverick and Storm might be safe now. The incident had exposed vulnerabilities he hadn't previously considered, both in the physical security of his home and in the public perception of police K9s. Something would have to change, and quickly, because next time they might not be so lucky. By the time James arrived at the police station with Maverick and Storm, the incident had already gone viral. #FreeThick9s was trending on local social media with dramatically edited clips showing Diane being led away in handcuffs, while James paraded his dogs to his vehicle. The narrative forming online bore little resemblance to reality, but that hardly mattered now. "You become quite the celebrity," Detective River remarked as James entered the bullpen. She turned her computer monitor to show him a particularly inflammatory post, a years-old photo of a military working dog in a combat zone, muzzled and armored, juxtaposed with a screenshot of Maverick from today. The caption read, "From war machines to terrorizing suburban neighborhoods. Police militarization in your backyard." James exhaled slowly, controlling his reaction. That's not even the same dog. "Facts aren't the priority here," River said, turning the monitor back. "But you should know what you're up against. The Suburban Animal Saviors group has over 15,000 members. They're organizing a protest outside the station tonight." "For cutting my fence and stealing my dogs?" James asked incredulously. "For standing up to systematic animal abuse and law enforcement," Rivera corrected, making air quotes. Diane Winters is apparently something of a local celebrity in animal rights circles. She's done this before, not with police dogs, but she's liberated several pets she deemed neglected. She runs a popular blog documenting her rescues. James ran a hand through his hair, the weight of the situation settling on his shoulders. What's happening with her legally? "She's being processed. Her attorney is already here. Arrived before she did, actually. Well-known animal rights lawyer." River handed him a coffee. "Brace yourself. This is going to get messy." In the conference room, Chief Harrigan was already in damage control mode, speaking with the department's public information officer. Mercer, he acknowledged as James entered. K9's been checked by the vet? Yes, sir. No injuries. They're with Officer Chen for standard post-incident evaluation. Good. We're issuing a statement in 20 minutes. The narrative is already getting away from us. The chief gestured to the chair across from him. Tell me everything. Every interaction you've had with this woman before today. James sat, organizing his thoughts. Diane Winters has filed 8 complaints about my dogs in the past 4 months. Noise complaints, allegations of neglect, claims they were aggressive toward passersby. Animal control investigated twice and found no violations. I've received anonymous notes in my mailbox, pamphlets about animal cruelty with passages highlighted. Same pamphlet I found at the breach in my fence today. As James continued detailing the pattern of harassment, his phone buzzed repeatedly with notifications. Against his better judgment, he glanced down to see multiple messages from fellow officers and friends. Problem? Chief Harrigan asked, noticing his distraction. Someone's posted my home address online, James said, his voice tight. They're calling for people to document the prison where the K9s are kept. The chief's expression darkened. You're not going back there tonight. We'll arrange temporary housing for you and the dogs until we can secure your property. Across town, the holding cell area of the police station was buzzing with unusual activity. Diane Winters sat on a bench, no longer in handcuffs but still in custody, surrounded by not only her attorney, but also 2 representatives from regional animal rights organizations. This is perfect, said the younger of the 2 representatives, a woman with a sleeve of animal-themed tattoos and a rescue is my favorite breed t-shirt. We couldn't have scripted a better catalyst for the campaign. I didn't do this for your campaign, Zoe, Diane replied tensely. I did it because those dogs needed help. And they'll get it, her attorney interjected smoothly. Along with every other K9 in the department, this incident gives us standing to demand a full investigation into the K9 program, their living conditions, training methods, deployment protocols. We're already drafting the petition for city council, Zoe added, and the protest tonight will keep the pressure on. We're expecting at least 300 people. Diane looked less certain now. I just want to help those specific dogs. They seem so miserable, left alone in that yard for hours. Her attorney patted her hand condescendingly. This was never about just 2 dogs, Diane. This is about changing the system, and you've given us our Rosa Parks moment. Meanwhile, James sat in Lieutenant Ray's office reviewing security footage from his street compiled over the past month. The systematic surveillance of his home was undeniable. The same vehicles appearing repeatedly, people walking dogs past his house at regular intervals, even a drone that had flown over his property twice. They've been watching me for weeks, James said, disbelief evident in his voice, planning this whole thing. And documenting it all on private Facebook groups and message boards, Ray's added. Cybercrime unit is pulling what they can, but it's extensive. They were tracking your shift schedule, noting when the dogs were alone. They even had a code name for the operation, Project Liberation. James leaned back, processing the information. So what happens now? Now, you're on administrative leave with pay while Aya investigates the security breach. Standard procedure when department assets are targeted. Ray saw James about to protest and held up a hand. It's not a punishment, Mercer. It's protection for you and the K9s and Winters. That's where it gets complicated. DA wants to make an example of her. Felony theft of police property, criminal trespass, destruction of government property. But her attorney is already spinning this as a whistleblower situation, claiming she was acting out of legitimate concern for animal welfare. A knock at the door interrupted them. Officer Chen appeared, looking troubled. Sir, you need to see this, she said, holding out her tablet. The screen showed a live stream of the growing protest outside the station. The crowd had swelled well beyond 300, with demonstrators carrying signs bearing slogans like K9s are not tools and end animal slavery. But what caught James' attention was the enlarged photo being projected onto the side of a van, an aerial shot of his backyard, with Maverick and Storm visible in their kennels. That's my house, he said quietly. That's a drone shot of my property. There's more, Chen said grimly, swiping to another screen. They've started a fundraiser for Diane's legal defense. It's already raised over $30,000. As James stared at the tablet, watching the crowd chant and wave signs demanding justice for the very woman who had cut his fence and taken his partners, he realized something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't going to blow over. It wasn't a simple case of trespassing and theft anymore. It had become a movement, and somehow he and his K9 partners had been cast as the villains. 3 days after the fence-cutting incident, James sat in a hotel room, scrolling through news coverage on his laptop while Maverick and Storm dozed at his feet. The department had arranged for them to stay at a pet-friendly extended-stay hotel on the outskirts of town, far enough from his compromised address to ensure their safety, but close enough for James to report to the station when needed. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, clicking through yet another article painting Diane Winters as a crusading animal welfare advocate who had exposed the dark underside of police canine programs. The piece included quotes from self-proclaimed experts questioning everything from the ethics of using dogs in law enforcement to the psychological impact of weaponizing animals. What bothered James most was how few of these stories included input from actual canine handlers or canine behavior specialists. No one seemed interested in the fact that Belgian Malinois were specifically bred for the work they did, that they thrived on the structure and purpose their roles provided. His phone rang, the screen showing his surgeon's number. "Mercer. How are you holding up?" Sergeant Donovan asked without preamble. "About as well as can be expected when I'm effectively in hiding because someone posted my home address online," James replied, running a hand over his face. "Any updates?" "Mixed news. DA's office has reduced charges against Winters to misdemeanor criminal trespass and property damage. They're dropping the theft charges entirely." James sat up straighter. "What? Why?" "Political pressure. Her legal team is arguing that she had no intent to permanently deprive you of property, that she was acting out of genuine concern for animal welfare." Donovan's frustration was evident even through the phone. Between the protests and the media coverage, the DA doesn't want to look like they're punishing a good Samaritan. James felt a simmering anger building. "So she gets a slap on the wrist for actions that could have gotten her killed if my dogs had responded differently." "There's some good news," Donovan offered. "The investigation into the larger group's activities is advancing. Cybercrime Unit has documented extensive planning and surveillance of not just your home, but 3 other K9 handlers in the county. We're looking at potential conspiracy charges for the ringleaders." "Let me guess, Diane Winters wasn't one of them." "No, she appears to have been a useful pawn, passionate enough to take action, naive enough to take the fall if things went wrong." After ending the call, James knelt beside his dogs, scratching behind their ears as he contemplated his next move. The department's official stance was clear: keep a low profile, let internal affairs and the legal system handle it, wait for the media cycle to move on. But James knew that strategy left a vacuum that Diane's supporters were all too happy to fill with their narrative. And he wasn't the only one affected. Every K9 handler in the department was now under scrutiny, their methods questioned, their relationships with their partners cast in a sinister light. His phone buzzed with a text from Officer Chen. "Have you seen Rivera's posts? Check social media." James opened his rarely used social media account to find a public post from Detective Rivera that was rapidly gaining traction. It wasn't a statement or a defense of the department. It was simply a compilation of video clips showing police canines in action, not apprehending suspects or performing drug searches, but in their off-duty moments, playing in the yard with their handlers, curled up on living room floors with children, performing tricks for treats, undergoing regular veterinary checkups. The post included a simple caption: "These are our partners, not our prisoners. #9truth. The comments section had exploded with current and former K9 handlers sharing their own stories and photos. The #K9truth was quickly gathering momentum, providing a counter-narrative to the #FreeThick9s campaign. As James scrolled through the responses, an idea began to form. He texted Chen back, "Tell Rivera this is brilliant. I want to take it further." By the next morning, James had permission from the chief to pursue what they were calling Operation Transparency. If the public was suddenly interested in police canines, they would get an unfiltered look at the reality, not the sensationalized version being pushed by Diane's supporters. 3 days later, James stood in the department's K9 training facility, surrounded by local news cameras and carefully vetted social media influencers. Maverick and Storm sat attentively at his side, the picture of K9 professionalism. "Welcome to the first of our department's new monthly K9 open house events," he began, addressing both the physical audience and the cameras live streaming to thousands online. "Today, we're opening our doors to show you exactly what police K9 training entails, how our dogs live, and why the partnership between handler and K9 is built on trust and respect, not fear or coercion." For the next 3 hours, James and his fellow K9 handlers demonstrated training exercises, explained their dogs' care routines, and answered questions about everything from daily nutrition to retirement protocols for aging K9s. Veterinarians and animal behaviorists were on hand to provide expert context about the breeds used in police work and their natural drives. The most powerful moment came when James invited a young woman in a wheelchair to approach. She was a former crime victim who had been located by Storm after being abducted and left in an abandoned building 2 years earlier. "I wouldn't be alive without this dog and his handler," she told the crowd, her hand resting on Storm's head as the dog gently leaned against her wheelchair. When people say police dogs shouldn't exist, they're saying I shouldn't have been found. As the event concluded, James noticed a familiar face at the back of the crowd. Ted Wilson, his neighbor who had provided security footage after the incident. The older man approached, a smile crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Quite the comeback, Officer Mercer," he said, offering his hand. "I've been following this whole situation. Thought you might like to know."